you're okay. Right, we're going to be annotating before you remind today. We've done this a couple of times, so you should be pretty comfortable with it. I've also shared some examples of kind of the best annotations from your group. So this, we should be trying to aim for that level of detail that we had in those examples. We're going to start off looking at the context a little bit, and then we're going to start to explore the first two stanzas of the poem. Right, so there's a picture of Caroline Duffy. It's a strong hairstyle. I know that's what you're thinking. You might want to jot that down. Caroline Duffy is a poet with a really good hairstyle. Right, make notes in your anthologies, either at the top or at the bottom. Listen to your heart. She was poet laureate. I wouldn't write that down. Duffy's mum died about a decade after the poem was written. That's important because obviously I haven't read it. She does talk about her mum, the ghost of her mum in the second half of the poem, and that's a metaphorical ghost because her mum actually doesn't die until around 10 years after she's written this poem. She was brought up in Staffordshire. She studied philosophy. She was an active poet, and the underground scene, the gritty underground poetry scene. Don't write that down. Write those bit down. So she's raised as a Roman Catholic, and that'll explain the numerous religious references throughout her body of work and in this poem in particular. This poem was published in Duffy's prize-winning 1993 collection, Meantime. I studied Meantime when I did A-level literature because I'm really old. So I was taught this poem and now I'm teaching it you. How amazing. The poem is addressed to her mum. She's got this sort of weird narrative perspective in that she blends some of her childhood memories in with what she imagines her mum's life was like before she was born. So it's this kind of weird idea in this poem that almost that she can see her mum. Now I always think this is linking to a Buddhist belief. So Buddhists believe that the child picks its parents, that you're somewhere waiting, maybe with a stork, maybe you're with the stork, waiting to be carried down to your mum and dad in like a little bundle. That's how it works. And you decide which parents you think would be best for you. That's a Buddhist belief. So maybe she's drawing on that idea that she was able to see her mum before she was born because Buddhists believe that children pick their own parents. She's not a Buddhist, she's a Catholic, but I just wonder if she's drawing on that idea. She talks about her mum's youth and the sacrifices she had to make to raise a child in the 1950s, which is when Duffy was born. And it is, I'm always wary of saying fully autobiographical, but at least semi-autobiographical, it does refer to things that we know are in her life. But it could also be a dramatic monologue. It could be a character that she's made up and that she's talking about. You'll ultimately have to decide. Okay, there's the poem. Pause the slide now and read again. It's really worth reading things more than once. Okay, so what happens in the poem? The speaker is thinking back 10 years before she was born to her mum's life, and she imagines her on the street corner with her friends in a nice polka dot dress, and she compares her mum to Marilyn Monroe. She then describes her mum dancing and having a night out before getting told off by her mum. And when the speaker's born, they go to mass and then they would dance on the way back. The poet ends with a sense of possibly regret, comparing how nice her mum's life was before she was born with actually how difficult it became after Caroline Duffy was born. Right, some new terms. Some of them you'll know, they're not all new. So the terms are on the left hand side, and I've matched the definition for you. I was going to do a task where you match them up, and then I thought, well, if that were me, what I would just do is click onto the next slide where they were already matched. Maybe you're better than I would be. Maybe you're more honest than me. I don't know. But just take a minute, pause me waffling on, and jot these things down in your anthology. So you know how this works now. We're going to try and annotate the poem in as much detail as possible. The notes are colour coded to help you follow the particular bit that I'm talking about. And don't forget to listen to me. I'll say words and you'll write some of them down, and it'll be brilliant. Okay, so starting with the first stanza, first few words, I'm 10 years away from the corner you left on with your pals. Those first few words really help to situate where the poem is taking place. It also emphasises that it's fictional because obviously you're not able to see your parents before they're born. This is, so linking back to the keywords that you're looking at before, this is the omniscient narrator. So this is a godlike narrator who knows exactly what's happened to her mom even before she was born. If you remember in A Christmas Carol that we've already studied, we have an omniscient narrator in that. So the opening lines, Marley was dead to begin with, tell us clearly that the voice narrating that novel is able to see what happened in the past, happened in the present, and what will happen in the future. And this is exactly the same with this poem. So Carol Ann Duffy, or the speaker, is able to see what her mum's life was in the past, even before she was born. So we've got this definite sense of omniscience, this godlike narrator who knows everything. Sometimes people find this poem a little bit confusing because it's a sort of weird idea to get your head around, but those first few words are just to tell us this is 10 years before Carol Ann Duffy was born, and she's recreating what her mother's life was like. Now, quite often people think that this is based on a photograph. The initial part, the initial sort of description is based on a photograph that she's seen. Maybe this is a photograph that her mum has up in the house and she's seen this image of what her mum was like when she was younger, and she's building from there. She's with her pals, Maggie McGeaney and Jean Duff. Now this is colloquial language, it's like informal language. So there's a definite sense here, I think, of a real informality in the way that she's communicating with her mum. Potentially this tells us that as an adult, they have a very close relationship, that it's more of a sort of friend type relationship, and therefore she's able to use this kind of informal language, this colloquial language, to be able to kind of discuss with her because they are very close. They've grown up. As she's grown up, they've become closer. I don't know this for a fact, but I always feel like the fact that the names are there, that they're real people. These were her mother's real friends. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know if you could find out if you Googled it. I don't really want to. In my head, they're her mum's friends, mates, and we know their name because maybe they stay friends, or maybe her mum talks to Carol Ann Duffy about them. I don't know, but I always think it makes them feel like real people. The three of you bend from the waist, holding each other or your knees, and shriek at the pavement. So in that sentence, we move away from the idea that this could be a photograph. This is something that's come to life because we've got a real sense of movement, bend, and shriek in particular. Now, I always envisage this to be that they're laughing so much that like their sides are hurting. Maybe somebody's told a grammar joke because they're the best kinds of jokes. So maybe somebody's done that, but the three of them are just absolutely like bent over, laughing, having a wonderful time. Shriek, like a shrill noise. There's a sense of like this isn't controllable, like they're just so happy and joyous. They can't help but shriek, and it's sort of noisy and funny, and just this idea that at this moment her mum's just having a wonderful time, and this is kind of reflective of what her life is like. It's just fun and exciting, and I think that maybe Carol Ann Duffy has seen this photograph, but now it's sort of coming to life, and that's creating that sense that she's omniscient and actually she can really see and experience what actually happened there. Right, your polka dot dress blows around your legs, Marilyn. Right, so this is an allusion to Marilyn Monroe. Now, the allusion to Marilyn Monroe really worked because Marilyn Monroe was a real icon in the 1950s, really sort of had a massive influence on how women looked and dressed and kind of how they behaved, I guess. So we looked in the last lesson at that little clip of Marilyn Monroe and what she was like. and that she was sort of this larger than life real icon that everybody would have sort of looked up to and fancied and all those kind of things. So that reference, given that her mum was growing up in the 1950s, is really relevant. I think that she sees her mum as having the same qualities as Marilyn Monroe, in the sense that she's glamorous and beautiful, and that everybody might want to look at her, you know, like she's somebody who draws people attention. And I think in that allusion, that reference to Marilyn, there's a sense that potentially she could have gone on to be a star. I don't know if it's true, but from the speaker's perspective, her mum had all these qualities of this Hollywood film star, and so maybe she could have gone on to have been a star, been a celebrity. Maybe that was what she could have done if she hadn't have had a child. And then in the 1950s, there's no real option to have children and then go out and have this sort of career in show business. That's not really an option that's available. The idea, particularly the 1950s, is that once you have a child, you settle down, you stay at home, you look after the home, you look after your child. And maybe she's questioning the potential that her mum had if she hadn't have had a child at all. The reference to the dress blowing around her legs is on the next slide, so have a look at that now. Right, so this is the image. So it's a really famous image on that left-hand side of Marilyn Monroe. I think she's promoting a film. She stands over one of those street grates in New York, and they do have sort of bursts of steam that come out through them. And as she's standing on it, her skirt blows up, and she's all sort of coquettish and coy, and holds it down. And it's a really iconic, famous image. And so that line is referencing that particular photo, and that's how she imagines her mom looked at that time. As I've said, we don't know if that's true or if it's just her perception, but she sees her mom as having this potential to be as big as this sort of Hollywood star. Okay, so second stanza, I'm not here yet. Another reminder, this is just, if you've forgotten, if you missed that in the first sort of line of the first stanza, just a reminder, this is an unusual narrative perspective. She is talking to her mum before she was born. The thought of me doesn't occur is a sort of interesting line. There's a sense almost in that line where the speaker's like irritated. The thought of me doesn't even occur. Like, you haven't even thought about me. Maybe she feels irritated that there was a period in her life where her mum wasn't fixated on her. Maybe she was the sort of mum who was just let her world revolve around Carol Ann Duffy, and now she's just like, you weren't even thinking about me. And that it's kind of unusual for her to imagine her mum in a world before she existed. In the ballroom with the thousand eyes. So that's some hyperbolic synecdoche. Hyperbolic synecdoche. So synecdoche is where we've got something small representing something bigger. So this isn't literally like a ballroom with a load of sort of amputated eyes just hanging in the air like dripping blood, and there's thousands of them, because that'd be quite freaky. That's not what she means. She means that there are lots of people in the ballroom looking at her mom. So we're building on the idea of the Marilyn Monroe thing here. So by comparing her mum to Marilyn Monroe, we've got that idea of sort of glamour and beauty and attraction and fame and celebrity and all those kind of ideas. And she's building on that here. She's saying in the ballroom, so when her mum went dancing, everybody looked at her, thousands of eyes drawn to her. And that gives us a sense of how good of a dancer she was, but also just how she had something about her that drew people's attention, and that people sort of liked to look at her and liked to see her. The fizzy movie tomorrow is the right walk home could bring. I always think fizzy, like that excited feeling, like young gloves and like buzzing about it. You can imagine her mum having these experiences so beautiful and so sort of appealing to everybody, so glamorous, that she'd have these sort of movie experiences, you know, like you might have in an old film that's like the date is walking his partner back home, and it's all romantic, and they're in the street and the stars are out and it's beautiful, and it's that sort of idea that she was going to have that kind of life that was available to her because of how glamorous and wonderful she was. So all those feelings that the right walk home could bring, you know, it's like a film. So imagine the mum had the ability to have a life that was like something out of a movie. I knew you would dance like that. So she can see her mum being young and dancing, and maybe that's drawing partly on a memory of her dancing. Don't know. Before You Were Mine, repeating the title, creating that sense of possessiveness again. Before you were mine, she means before you were my mum, but it is an ownership and a possession in it. Before you were mine, your ma stands at the close with a hiding for the late one. You reckon it's worth it. So we've got this idea that actually her mum was beautiful, glamorous, popular, appealing to everybody, but also a little bit naughty, a little bit cheeky. That her mum would wait for anybody that was late. She had a curfew, a time that she had to be back, and her mum would wait. And then anyone that was late would get hit, get a hiding, and she didn't care. Caroline Duffy's mum wasn't bothered. She reckons it's worth it. She enjoyed her life so much. If we think about all the images we've had, she's sort of in the street laughing with her friends. She's dancing. She's being watched by loads of people. You know, she loved that life so much. She didn't care if she was late and if her mum was going to give her a hit. She wasn't bothered because she thought actually that was worth it. So we've got this sense of her mother as being not only sort of glamorous and beautiful and sort of popular, but also being a little bit rebellious, being a little bit naughty, doing things that she shouldn't do. And maybe that's surprising. I think you think of your mum as being somebody who like puts the boundaries in, does the right stuff. And so this realization or this kind of learning that her mum was actually quite rebellious and a bit naughty, I think maybe is quite surprising for her.